What's going on, guys? Hackman is back today with some more Destiny, and in this video I'm going to be going through the entire Wrath of the Machine hard mode raid with the icebreaker equipped. So just a little disclaimer here, I'm going to assume that you have background knowledge of how the raid works and what the icebreaker is. Okay, so assuming you know what both of those are, let's get right into this with the very start of the raid. So it doesn't really matter what weapons you use for this part, just because respawning isn't restricted. So I mean, if you wanted to, you could run all blues and still get away with it. But the icebreaker is pretty good for the beginning. It's good for DPSing Vozic when his shield's lower. You can always count on just pulling out that icebreaker, not having to reload, and you'll have about 6 shots ready to go. It's also really good for DPSing the Voltage Eater shanks. You know, you can just pull out your icebreaker if you're on defense and you're not a runner. You can just whip it right out and take down that shank, and it should be able to regen all of its ammo before the next one spawns in. So that's pretty good. And like I said, it doesn't really matter what weapon you use, just because respawning isn't restricted for this first part, but that's only for the first part. So let's move on to Vozic Part 2, where this does matter. So I really actually liked this sniper rifle more than I thought I would with Vozic Part 2, because it's really, straight up, it's really good for the monitors. Okay, there's also kind of a glitch where if you shoot the monitor, the gun thinks that you're missing and it will give you back ammo, like with the mulligan perk. So that's kind of strange, but I mean, it works. It's really good though, like I said, because you know the struggle is real when you pull out a sniper and you really just need to put some shots in that monitor and you have to reload, you know, or you don't have any ammo. But that will never be the case with the icebreaker. You can always whip it out, know you'll have close to full shots regenerated, and you can put like 6 rounds into that monitor. It's also pretty good for the captains for this part. I mean, I would recommend you have your other teammate having a sword, just because swords are great for the captains. But if your teammate doesn't have a sword, you can still put 6 nice shots into the captain without having to reload and knowing you will have ammo. Also, as far as DPSing Vozic goes, it's pretty good. You know, you'll do quite a bit of damage. Only problem is, you know, you have a maximum supply of 6. Then you have to wait. So, you know, you can put some 6 shots in, and then you'll just have to wait and use your primary for more to regenerate while you're DPSing Vozic. Overall, though, this weapon is really good. You know, if you aren't worrying that much about DPS, this gun is really amazing just for taking out the monitors and taking down the captains. So just a quick recap, the icebreaker greatly exceeded my expectations for Vozic Part 2. You know, it takes up an exotic slot, but what exotics do you need for Vozic Part 2? You know, with Axis, people like Dark Drinkers, so you can DPS him, but that's not the case with Vozic, so I would highly recommend you put on an icebreaker when you're facing Vozic in the Wrath of the Machine encounter. Let's move on to the Siege Engine. With the Siege Engine encounter, there are a few areas where the icebreaker does really well, and other areas where it's not that important. To start off the encounter, you need to take down the turrets on the Death Zamboni. And honestly, the icebreaker is pretty good for this part. You know, you can pull it out, you'll know that you have ammo, and reloading isn't a problem for DPS. So you can just put 6 quick shots in there. You know, you will run out of ammo, and then you'll have to wait for it to regenerate. So if that's the case, usually if your whole team is shooting it, you won't even need more ammo than that. And if you do, you can just put some primary shots into it. Overall, you know, this might not be as good as other snipers, but in the end it's still a sniper, and it does rather well for taking down the turrets on the Zamboni. Moving on through the encounter, the only other areas where this sniper is really good is on the other ships that drop down during the encounter and the tank. The reason why it's good for the ships is because, you know, a lot of teams like to take down the turrets on those as well, and you can just pull it out, know that you'll have ammo, and know that you won't have to reload. So if you're one of those people that's just going to stay back and take down all the turrets on all the ships, this is a really good sniper for the encounter. Aside from that, there's also the spider tank, and it doesn't do that well against the spider tank just because you're going to need more shots than 6. So it's still a sniper and it does rather well, but you're going to need to start using primary and waiting for the shots to regenerate. So with the Siege Engine encounter, I really liked using the icebreaker, but it's not as essential as it was for Vozic. You know, there are other weapons that are better, and this is kind of about the part of the raid where people want you to use an exotic sword. So, you know, swords are really nice for this part, and the icebreaker does take up an exotic slot. So like I said, it's pretty good, but it was not as essential as it was for earlier parts of the raid. Let's move on to Axis Part 1. Now, the Icebreaker is pretty good for this part. You know, it's not bad, but it's not like needed at all. You know, the only thing it's really good for is the turrets that shoot you, you know. In case your teammate's getting shot, you can always whip it out, know that you'll have ammo, and know that you won't have to reload. You know, nothing's worse than pulling it out and realizing you need to reload and your teammate's dying, or realizing that you don't have any ammo at all. So that's what it's really good for. At first I thought it'd be good for the captains, but you can't really shoot the captains from where they spawn on the left and right. Maybe you can in the middle, but the only problem with Axis Part 1 is it's just so simple of an encounter, and it makes the Icebreaker, it makes almost any weapon just kind of meh, you know? Like, the only thing that I really think is needed or people want is something that can take out the captains, such as a Gallarhorn or an exotic sword. And because of this encounter, you can just use your super on the captains, so it doesn't really matter. The only thing it was really good for was the turrets. So with the final encounter of the Wrath of the Machine raid, we have Axis Part 2. Now, this encounter actually did better than I thought it would with the Icebreaker, and really the only reason it's good is for DPSing Axis. Now, the only downside to using the Icebreaker is that it fills up an exotic slot, and a lot of people want you to run an exotic heavy for this part, not only for DPSing Axis, but for taking down the captains. So, if you are doing like the challenge and you can use your super on the captains, or if you have a teammate that can take down the captains, that's one thing that's out of the way. And then in the end, it just comes down to that a lot of the teams out there want you to run a Dark Drinker or a Raise Lighter for the final phase of DPS on Axis, and I was stuck with using my Icebreaker. But as far as DPSing on the other phases go, you know, I would unload all 6 of my shots from my Icebreaker on Axis, and then they would all recharge for the next round, and then on the final round I'd have just about all 6 back. You know, so that was pretty good. And overall, your DPS on Axis is going to be pretty high if all you use is the Icebreaker all the time and your primary when necessary. You know, as you can see right here, my whole team was using swords, and I was stuck to just use my Icebreaker. But in the end, my damage compared to them was pretty good. So, like I said, Axis was actually a pretty good encounter to use the Icebreaker for. It's not the best, but it works. So in the end, would I use the Icebreaker for the Wrath of the Machine? Yes, I would. And the only thing is, you know, for me, I basically just went through the entire thing and I forced myself to use the Icebreaker. With you guys, you can just pull it out when you think it's needed. So I would definitely use it for Vozic Part 2 and Axis Part 2. It's pretty good. And throughout the rest of the raid, it's really just up to your personal preference. I was really excited to do this video because I loved the Icebreaker in year 1, and it was just a really raid weapon, you know? You could hang back, let your shots recharge, and basically just camp, you know? You could hang back and you would never run out of ammo. And that's not exactly the case with the Wrath of the Machine, you know? There are a lot of new mechanics that are introduced. Either way though, it's still pretty good for about half the raid, and like I said earlier, it's just up to your personal preference. I know that I, for one, will be using the Icebreaker in the Wrath of the Machine raid in the future. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a comment, you know, on what you liked, what you didn't like. Leave me some feedback. I'd really appreciate it. Make sure you like this video if you enjoyed it at all, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more Destiny uploads coming from me in the future. This is Hackman, and I will see you guys in the next video.